Come in, Ocean Sailor. Come in, Ocean Sailor.
The Ocean Sailor podcast. Brought to you by Ocean Sailor magazine and Kraken Yachts. This podcast was recorded during the coronavirus pandemic. All participants adhered to social distancing and coronavirus guidelines at all times.
Welcome to the Ocean Sailor podcast with me, Dick Durham.
And me, Dick Beaumont. This is our very first one. Very exciting.
So I suppose we'd better start by telling you a bit about ourselves. I mean, why would you lend your ears to Dick Durham? Who the hell is he? Or Dick Beaumont for that matter? Well, Dick Durham, that's me speaking. I've been sailing for 12 years, since I was 12, I should say. I write a column for Yachting Monthly. I've been a yachting journalist for the best part of 25 years, I suppose. I write for Classic Boat Magazine, Yachting Monthly, and I've written about 8 books on sailing.
And I'm the owner and founder of Kraken Yachts and Ocean Sailor, and a lifetime yachtsman. I've sailed a long way around this world and lived on my boat while I've doing it for a large part of my life. So that's our credentials. Hopefully you'll find this interesting.
And the reason we got together is a bit of a story in itself. As usual, it began in the pub.
Yeah, it was about 3 years ago, wasn't it, Dick?
Something like that, yes. I happened to be in the Crooked Billet pub in Old Lee, which is both our hometown. The seawater laps against the windows there, so we were sort of musing about the ocean deeps when I meet this giant bearded fellow and we get into conversation. It turns out that we've lived in parallel lives, Dick, isn't it? You live only...
Yeah, there was some very strange things. It turned out we both drank in the Crooked Billet since we were teenagers. It would be inappropriate to say quite how young teenagers we were, probably, but which is in Leigh-on-Sea.
Definitely underrated.
And we instantly got on, and then we found out we've kind of been divers, we've been sailors. It was great.
We're both members of a Sea Scout troop. We've both been divers, although Dick's done a lot more than I have, and we've both been sailing all our lives. Dick far more than I have, as he's crossed oceans, whereas I'm more of a coasting man. But anyway, the chatter carried on and grew, and I asked Dick why he was suddenly back in this country, because of course he'd been sailing in the Far East, China, Indian Ocean. Suddenly he's back in Leigh-on-Sea where there isn't much water. So what was he doing here, I said.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just completed quite a long voyage, 35,000 miles. I spoke to a good friend of ours, a guy called John Costimia, who's now sales director for Kraken Yachts. And he told me of you. And that's where we wound up having a beer and realising that we've got an awful lot of common interests and an awful lot of common beliefs, I think, is fair to say.
What was interesting was that here you we're the same sort of age, both in our dotage, you could say. But anyway...
Steady on. Talk for yourself.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I will talk for myself. I've got my retirement yacht, which is the perfect estuary boat with a lift keel. And you were trying to find your perfect ocean-going yacht for your family. And this led you into the discovery that it perhaps didn't exist.
Well, no, it's not it didn't exist. It was that my history goes back to building my first boat when I was in 1978. And I built that boat out of steel back in that day. And there was quite a few people. This is in a small boatyard in Benfleet Creek, Dalton's boatyard, and there were 5 other guys building their boats there to go off and sail around the world. That's quite changed a lot over the last 20 or 30 years. It's different.
So they were just to come in there, Dick. So this is what, early 1970s?
Late 70s, 1978.
So there were, half a dozen people trying to fix their dream of going offshore, and they were building a type of boat. Did they differ very much, or
no? They were all stunningly similar.
Right.
Every boat had a long keel. Every boat had a fully protected rudder. and everybody was searching for the ultimate bomb-proof solution of what it should be built out of. The boat I was building was steel. A friend of mine and three other friends of mine were building in ferroconcrete. Another guy built in steel, and one guy was building in GRP. GRP was all pretty early, early days of GRP then.
Yes,
And,
but they were all integral keels, were they?
Yeah, all integral keels, all fully protected rudders, and people considered. I'm sure people considered things from a different standpoint. And I think that's incredibly important. How do you go off and have one of these amazing adventures with your family, often, worrying about, well, I wonder if my boat will sink? You can't do that. You can't enjoy that. You can't put your family at that much risk.
And this is the pivotal point, isn't it? Because at that stage, when you were building your steel boat, there were other guys building boats, and they were bomb-proof.
Yeah, everybody was bomb-proof. And here's a very interesting point.
But just to come back, Dick, why did you not continue with your steel boat, which you felt was bomb-proof? Why did you have to go and build another one? Because you got older and you wanted a more comfortable boat, or? Yeah,
well, we sailed off, and I sailed off with my young family, and had a lot of fun for about 15 years, or 12 to 15 years. But then business got in the way, and family life changed. And the next thing you find out, okay, I'm not getting any time to actually do any of these things. But I have always been fairly focused on wanting to go off, and the whole purpose of being involved in business for me was to fund going off and sailing around the world.
But by the time you could afford to do that, you'd sold your boat because you had to concentrate on business. You'd sold the bomb-proof boat.
I wasn't using it, and it's a steel boat.
Right.
Being a steel boat, they are fantastically strong. I don't think there's another material you could build out of that's as strong as that. But they need huge amount of maintenance, which is a problem. So I sold that boat and thought, well, I'll start again later.
So you sold the boat, you concentrated on your business, raising the family.
Yeah.
And then when you were free of all those commitments, it was time to go back to sea, to go back to the adventure. And that's when you discovered what?
Well, at that point, there were companies around that were, and we're talking 15 years ago, there were a few companies still building with integral keels. For me, you got to start with, can this boat sink? If in the first place you've solved that question, the rest of it all fits in fairly easy. But can this boat sink? Is it bomb-proof? It's got to start with, can the keel come off? Is the rudder fully protected? And is the hull thick enough to take collision with all the kinds of stuff that's out there? And I found that incredibly difficult. I did to find somebody that was building in that style.
And who was that?
It was a company in Taiwan called Kraken Yachts, and that worked out well because they had kept to old core designs, they built a boat, and it was a 58-footer I bought. I modified it, worked with them on the modifications, but yeah, the boat was then and was actually, because I went through. I sailed hundreds of thousands of miles in it, or more than 150,000 miles in that boat, and through lots and lots of circumstances that would definitely have challenged or compromised the more modern-day cruisers that we see around now. The boat was bomb-proof. I started from the place I was safe, and that's really and that was all great.
Why did that have to go?
Well, my family got bigger. It was. I had 15 years of great fun on the boat. Sailed everywhere around not everywhere around the world, a long way around the world. Sailing around the world, not necessarily round the world. And the boat was great, but all of my family turned up in Australia, and nobody fitted on board.
Excellent. So that's when you decided to have a look round for a bigger cruising boat that was bomb-proof. And that had to have the integral keel, the Skeghan rudder, huge layup to be strong.
Yeah, and a massive rig.
And a good rig.
Yeah, that's right. And I couldn't find it.
You couldn't find it.
It's simply, Tejano were out of business by that time. And I couldn't find what I was looking for. So I hope it illustrates how fundamental I feel this is, because I went into the extreme of contracting a designer, a yacht designer.
Who was that?
Kevin Dibley, who I knew, and having him built the kind of boat, having him design, I should say, the kind of boat that I knew I needed. And I went back to a boatyard in Taiwan to have that boat built. And that was the first Kraken, although actually at that time I had no idea or concept of wanting to start Kraken Yachts.
So how did that come about? As I understand it, you then had your dream boat, your 66-foot White Dragon, she's called. Beautiful boat. I've seen her. I've sailed on her. You brought her back, I think, from the Far East to the Mediterranean. Is that right? And is that en route? I think she turned a few heads. Is that what happened?
No. During the period of time I was designing this boat with Kevin and specifying it, obviously, when you've been sailing a lifetime, you meet quite a lot of other yachtsmen. And in telling people what I was doing, quite a few of them said, "Yeah, terrific. Will you build me one?"
So the request to build a Kraken yacht began while yours was still in build.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't realise when I was building White Dragon that she was going to be the first Kraken. What actually happened during that period of time, all of these friends, and I was telling all these friends about the things that I really believed in, obviously with total commitment and conviction and passion. And one guy in particular, the guy that I knew from Hong Kong, a guy called David Wilkinson, didn't know him very well. He bugged me, and he absolutely kept on and on and on about why wouldn't I build him a smaller version? And it then became clear to me, well, if I'm suffering from a problem that I can't find, knowing what boats I need out there being built, well, neither can anybody else. So I felt that there was not just a business gap in the market, not just a niche, but I felt there was a real need for something that really went back to the first principles, which were start with a boat that can't sink.
Yes, and so in a way you were you were not so much reinventing the wheel as reinventing the keel.
Yeah, yes, that's right. I mean, the first boat, in fact, White Dragon, doesn't have the zero keel that's been discussed, and most people do know about now. It didn't have that. It had an integral keel. It couldn't come off. It had a massive skeg in front of the rudder so that it could take any impact of things that we might hit or grounding. I've had people say, nobody that's a good yachtsman should ever run or yachtswoman should ever run aground. But that's a joke. And, go and sail in uncharted waters and see how you get on, because it's going to happen. And so there's no good praying and hoping that things that if you keep doing them enough are inevitably going to happen, don't happen. There's no point starting there. You might just as well say, okay, let's plan for the worst.
So what year then was White Dragon your first Kraken, in fact the world's first Kraken? What year did she launch and where did she go to?
She launched in 2016 after an 18-month build program that took 4 years. Okay. So we started back in 2012 with the first discussions with Kevin. It took a lot longer because we were doing something new, and there was lots of, one step forwards and two steps back, unfortunately, and eventually launched in 2016. Yeah.
And she was then based, in fact, I think she was built in Hong Kong, was she not?
She was built in Taiwan.
Oh, she was built in Taiwan. But then your company, which by now you realise you're going to start a company to build Krakens, smaller ones, and ones the same size as your one, 66 if possible, and that was going to be in Hong Kong. Why was that?
Well, because we I knew the yards in China and Taiwan were going to be able to build and produce the moulds. They're very expensive at the right kind of cost to enable us to not just build a 66, but build a 50, a 58, and a 66, which I think the 50 and the 58 is much more a regular size for blue water families to go off cruising. The 66, my 66, came about because I'm lucky enough to have my son and my daughter, son-in-law, and grandkids all want to come out sailing. So I needed a bit more space, and that's really where it came about. But the principles have to be the same. And I think that's quite an important point, because I think it's important, and the message I want to try and get across to people is this isn't about Kraken Yachts. This podcast and Ocean Sailor isn't about Kraken Yachts. It's about what do you really need to know, and what kind of a boat do you really need to go off and have a fantastic adventure across the world and its oceans. People have got to find out that they compromise some things.
You are lending your ears to Ocean Sailor Podcast, and I thank you for that. So please find us on Twitter or at Ocean Sailor Podcast, or be part of the conversation by using hashtag Ocean Sailor Podcast. So in a way then, Dick, your experience, not only sailing all your life and having sailed many, many miles offshore, when it came to the time of your life to enjoy yourself and enjoy your sailing, you found the boat wasn't there. That you'd acquired all this knowledge, you had a lot of experience reading the right books, as we all did when we were younger, about ocean sailing, about cruising, about being, independent and self-reliant. And all of that was missing.
Sorry to interrupt you. And that was another difference. And that's actually what's led on to Ocean Sailor, the magazine, and this podcast. Because back in that day, there were dozens of books about yacht construction, which then led on to blue water sailing or ocean sailing. Blue water sailing is a kind of a later term, I think, and world cruising. There were loads of books. There was loads of books about how you should do it, what you need to know, how you need to build it. Dozens of books. They don't seem to be there any longer. And now people are relying, I believe, for their information on going to a boat show and talking to a salesman. And, there's some nonsense being talked.
What is wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with getting information from a boat show, of course, and for salesmen at the boat show. But the truth of the matter is that the job of crossing oceans and blue water cruising and living on board is a specific element of sailing. It's not general sailing. It's not what everybody's going to do. And there is no substitute for experience. And if you're going to want to find out about what a blue water boat, a blue water yacht or an ocean cruising yacht needs, you've got to talk to somebody that's done it. And actually, that's become fewer and fewer, and the books are not being written as they were. So I felt that there was a gap here, a place that needed to be filled, and that's really how it all came about. That we then started Ocean Sailor with your good kind self from the pub meeting. And your expertise in the field of journalism,
and that itself began, if you recall, with a press release from something called Kraken Yachts, which, although I mean, I'd met you, but I hadn't heard of Kraken Yachts, and this was handed to me. Say, this guy's in your area, check it out. And that's when I realised that you were reinventing the keel, let's put it that way, with the integral keel, the Skeg-Hun rudder.
No, I remember that first meeting. You asked, we sent out a press release about the zero keel, and you asked to do an interview with me, which you wanted to do down at Southampton. And that was going to be videoed, I think, for My Classic Boat, was it?
Yes.
Have I got that right? So you want to do this interview. And you set us up on this nice bluff overlooking the marina, big, huge marina. And your first opening question was, well, I've got this press release, so you're telling me all of these boats, and you swept your arm across 2,000 or 3,000 boats, all of these boats are not fit for purpose. Yeah, so
I did drop you in it a bit, and I do apologise for that. But it seemed a fair question because, let's face it, we were on the Hamble. That's the busiest river in the UK. There are 5,000 yachts there.
Dick, it was a totally fair question. It caught me off balance. Somewhere from within my subconscious, I managed to muster up, tell me the purpose, and I'll tell you if they're fit for it.
Yes.
But I do remember thinking at the first time, oh, this guy's not so bloody friendly. I didn't get an easy ride. Well, but it did bring out a lot, didn't it?
It did. I have to say, and there I am, I'm supposed to know these things, but I didn't know that even some of the new major designers in Scandinavia, we won't mention any names, had twin rudders. And you told me that, and I was absolutely gobsmacked because I had no idea. I mean, I don't do the new boat.
I mean, it wasn't until I started to look for the what was then turned out to be White Dragon, till I started to look for that. I first went to names who we won't mention here that we naturally associated with blue water cruising. And I found out, to my massive surprise, that they'd actually all moved out of what I consider to be the proper blue water cruising market. And, as you've just said, introduced things like twin rudders, bolt-on keels, straight stems, and were clearly really nothing more, in my view, than more expensive performance cruisers. And the two are not the same thing.
And why has the market gone that way? Virtually totally. I mean, it's virtually exclusively that, isn't it? It's bolt-on keels, it's twin rudders.
It is. It's quite interesting. I think that what's occurred is, if you go back to some of the founders of the companies that we know, they've all, bar none, either died or sold on to develop to companies and investment companies, perhaps to develop the businesses financially further. That means you need a bigger market. And the blue water cruising, ocean sailing, world cruising, liveaboard market is actually relatively small. So we kind of we've established that in Kraken Yachts. All we're ever going to try and do is build 10 boats a year. As soon as you start having to fill an order book with 30, 50, 100, 200 boats a year, you're then got the tail wagging the dog, haven't you?
Yes, I see.
If you see what I mean.
So then you're under the cosh of production.
You're on
and all the pressures that
you're
comes
under
with
the cosh of producing a profit, and an ever-growing profit. And it's not the reason we ever started Kraken Yachts. I've been fortunate to have had quite a successful life in business. It's not that wasn't ever my motivation. I really did want to build the kind of boat that I could tell people, yeah, you can sail across this ocean, you can go wherever you want, and it won't let you down. That's really what the motive was.
So the company began in Hong Kong. It is moved now, I think, to Turkey. You brought your own boat, White Dragon, to Turkey.
Yeah.
And I think that she's now based there. Is she at the yard that Krakens are now being built?
Yeah, I met you not long, having produced and built White Dragon. I met you just shortly after I'd done quite a surprising voyage, as its maiden voyage. I took her 35,000 miles from Hong Kong, across the Indian Ocean, down through the China Seas, across the Indian Ocean, around Cape of Good Hope, and south to north in the Atlantic, and then right the way across the Mediterranean as well. It was a 35,000-mile trip. I did it for two reasons. I did it because it looked like it was going to be a lot of fun, but I also did it because I can't really see how you can say, here, look, I'm going to tell you about this different boat to what everybody else is building, and it's better, and it's stronger, and it can do this stuff, without proving it. So I proved it.
So it was one hell of a shakedown cruise.
It was a hell of a shakedown cruise. Vertical, the learning curve was vertical. The funny thing is, just to mention at this point, well, perhaps we're mentioning that, I did actually wind up inadvertently, of course, and that's how all these accidents at sea happen, testing one of the very core concepts, which was the protected rudder. As we were about 700 or 800 miles from St Helena in the South Atlantic, in quite heavy weather. It was about 30 knots of wind with a 4-metre sea. We were doing 9 knots under good sail. We were going really well, and we stopped. Everybody flew through the boat. One guy gashed his head. One of the crew gashed his head.
You stopped dead?
We stopped dead. The boat's 45 ton. And we then sailed on and thought, oh, okay, wonder what that was. But that was checked below deck, no ingress of water, checked everything else, steering still working fine, autopilot still on. And it wasn't until we got to St Helena and I put my diving gear on. I'm quite into diving. And I went and checked the boat out. And I found that the skeg had taken a massive hit. And although there's a 12 mil stainless steel beam down the centre of the skeg, the bottom of the skeg and the shoe was actually bent out of alignment by 20 degrees.
Good grief.
Now, I had to take her out the water. We couldn't sail on. We might have been able to sail on, but, it's not the way to start.
But nevertheless, you'd sailed to there from the impact, which was how many
miles? we sailed about another 700 or 800 miles.
That's not bad going, is
it? No. And probably, in fairness, we probably could have carried on because, when but we didn't know that until we took the rudder off.
So you took the rudder off in St Helena.
Yeah, we lifted her out of the water. Yeah. Oh, that was a frightening experience.
And did you have it straightened then, the skeg? Or?
Yeah, and that's quite interesting. This is the point I was going to make, is that the press that straightened the skeg down the centre racked up to 7 ton. The pressure was 7 ton to straighten it again.
Really? That's interesting.
So it took we don't know what it was. We suspect it was a sleeping whale just below the surface because there was no other ostensible damage that you might see if we'd hit a container or something like that.
Right.
But, we've hit a lot of stuff. I've hit a lot of stuff sailing around this world. There's logs and there's pallets and there's containers.
So coming back anyway to White Dragon's epic voyage back from China, so you then relaunch from St Helena and you carry on up the Atlantic and arrive in Turkey, where you then start Kraken Yachts European yard, its main yard. I think you're no longer building in Hong Kong.
Well, yeah, okay. That's quite an interesting story that goes with that. We had now begun production in China. The yard that we'd used first in Taiwan was no longer in existence, so we moved production to China. And everything was hunky-dory. We went into production of the Kraken 50 for David Wilkinson, the guy I mentioned. And it wasn't until, despite agreeing with the factory and we thought agreeing with the Chinese Marine Department that we could carry out the kind of sea trials that we wanted to do, which is a month worth of sea trials, including a 500-mile continuous voyage. It's a different kind of boat. It's got to have a different kind of test. It wasn't
until...
That
must be unique in itself, mustn't it?
Well, yeah, and that was the problem. Because they were building lots of yachts in China, but when we came to launch it and do the actual sea trials, the Chinese Marine Department gave us 48 hours. Right. And so I knew straight away, hang on, this is not going to work.
But even so, 48 hours would have been enough to give you a 100-mile sea trial.
No, they wouldn't allow us to go outside the borders of the port either.
Right.
So China Marine Department wasn't up for allowing us to do any of the fundamental tests that I felt were necessary, and we had to take off on a 500-mile, which is about what it is, voyage to Hong Kong in what I considered to be an untried and untested boat.
Right.
Now, it made that voyage fantastic, and it was good. The boat was good.
That was the first Kraken built in Hong Kong.
In China.
Sorry.
That was the first boat built in China, yeah.
How many were built in China?
Two.
Two, okay.
Yeah.
And at that stage, you then moved production to Turkey because of the restrictions in China.
Well, I was sailing on this trip to across from Hong Kong. The problems we were getting were happening while I was on that trip, and by the time I got to Turkey, I knew I'd got some serious problems, and I wasn't really
Not with the boat, but with the Chinese authorities.
Yeah, with doing the kind of tests that the kind of tests that I felt were absolutely mandatory for a blue water boat. Yeah, so I mean, the problem was by the time I arrived in Turkey sailing White Dragon there, the problems in China had become quite intractable. Not only didn't they want to allow us to do the sea trials that I felt were absolutely mandatory, they didn't even want to allow us to step the mast and test the rig and test the sail. And all of the boat companies, I then found out, all of the boat companies in China, well-established boatyards, building good quality boats, all of them were exporting the boat as 95 or 90 or 80% finished and shipping them off to America or wherever it was for somebody out there to try and finish the boat and step the mast and then commission and sea trial it. And it's just not going to work for this kind of a boat. The boat really has to be completely tested before it's handed over to the client, and you need the yard there working with us. So we arrived in Turkey, to be honest, with a thought that I might have to shut Kraken because I couldn't work out how I was going to be able to do this.
Well, it's good that you didn't have to, but why did you choose Turkey?
I chose Turkey because I started to tell a friend of mine, Reni Tirmasen, who has been a good buddy over 30 years of sailing. I started to tell him the problems that we got and the problems we were having. And he said, look, Dick, you can't give this up because it's, us sailors, we know it's needed. And you should build it in Turkey.
Because he's based there.
He
understands it.
But what I didn't know at that point is there's a region in Turkey, Tuzla, which is almost, you would say, a complete parody of what Southampton was for the original yacht building industry in the UK. It's 30 yards, all building sailing yachts and different types of yachts and big power boats and super yachts. They're very big into super yachts. And their craftsmen were second to none, particularly their wood craftsmanship, their stainless steel, and their understanding. So there was then an infrastructure of suppliers. There was an infrastructure of technicians and of people that really understood how to build a boat. Because it's not, I know that's how it's being done in a lot of areas of the world, where essentially the people are building the boats on a production line, but we're not building that kind of a boat. We need people that understand yachts, understand the sea, and understand the rigours and the quality of that build.
So in Turkey, what you found is not just an infrastructure that's already there, but one that has the ability to supply a custom-built boat.
Yeah, that's right. The yard that we eventually wound up settling down with, and our joint venture partner, is a company called Submarine, who previously built super yachts, 30 metres, 28 metres about the smallest they built, up to 45 metres. And
So you're happily established now at Tuzla in Turkey, which I think is not far from Istanbul, is that right?
Yeah, it's just outside Istanbul, which in itself is a fantastic place to visit.
Course. And you've launched how many from there? Or
We haven't launched there yet. We have one. The first boat is going into build there, which is a Kraken 50 version 2. That's in build, I should say, already. And it will launch around about the end of March. So not very far off now. We're really excited and looking forward to that, because the version 2 has got even further enhancements and refinements for blue water cruising than the version 1 had.
So nothing but Turkish delight for you then, Dick.
God, Dick, that's terrible.
Someone had to say it.
Yeah, did they? Okay. Yeah, no, I'll tell you what, it has been a wonderful breath of fresh air, because the yard is a can-do yard, not a can't-do yard. The Turkish people, have really supported us fabulously well, and are very friendly and very, very diligent people. So, it's working out extremely well, much better than I would have hoped. And I'm very happy now that we have found our home in Turkey, yeah.
So you're listening to Ocean Sailor podcast with me, Dick Durham, and Dick Beaumont. Please don't forget to subscribe and also hit the like button from wherever you're getting your podcast. We're now going to talk about Ocean Sailor magazine and how that came about. And you can get it. It's a free magazine. You can just go on to www.oceansailormagazine.com and get this free magazine, all 40 pages of it. But let's go over now back to Dick Beaumont and ask him, Dick, if you would tell us why and how did Ocean Sailor come about?
Well, Ocean Sailor came about because I felt that I felt that the message and the gap that we were trying to fill is different to the industry as it stands at the moment and the yachts that are being built. And I'm very clear as to what those differences are. The boat has to have an integral keel, it has to have a protected rudder, it has to have a strong hull, and it has to have a bomb-proof rig. But there's much more to it than that. But they're the 4 core issues that you start with. If you remember, you asked to do an interview with me subsequent to the first one, so we didn't fall out that badly. And you asked to do an interview with me about what I believed was a blue water cruising boat. What was it? When we finished that, you said, well, you've named 10 key points. I'm going to call this article the 10 Commandments. You then had quite a bit of difficulty getting it published. I spoke to other journalists and other sort of media entities wanting to get these points out, and I ran into a brick wall. I ran into a brick wall because I had obviously not taken on board the issue that most of the points that I believe to be and design issues and build issues that are critical for a blue water cruising boat are not actually built in the specification of most boats being built today, who happen to be the people providing the advertising revenue. So I thought, well, how do we get this message out?
And then, and because it was called the 10 Commandments and not wishing to sound like Moses, I did nevertheless batter the editor of Yachting Monthly over the head and said, Theo, you've really got to listen to this, because, I mean, this guy, I said, I'm an objective journalist. I've been a yachting journalist for God knows how long, 20 plus years, 25 years. I've been sailing since I was 12 years old. I said, I am objective, but I know he's singing from the right hymn sheet. So, please hear us out and have a look at it. And in the end, I think they did publish it.
They did. We had to change a few bits about. We had to be not quite as perhaps as adamant as I would have liked to have been. And that was really the point, because I really do believe that you must not compromise on those 4 core issues, and that you can then, once you've got those, build other issues around it that really make the boat bomb-proof. And I think that's the starting place. And I wanted to try and get the message to people that you should compromise size, you should compromise equipment, but you shouldn't compromise the basic elements of the boat that are going to get you across oceans. And I was struggling to get that message out. I talked to quite a lot of other publishers, quite a lot of other, and they all said, "Yeah, Dick, you're dead right. We can't publish it."
So once again, you're in the situation. You're in the situation where you couldn't find at one time you couldn't find the right boat. Now you're in a position where you can't find the right magazine, or at least the right publication. You can't.
Yeah, I didn't.
So you're a man who says, right, I'm going to have the boat I want. I'm going to have the magazine I want to read, and so you've started.
Well, it wasn't the magazine that I wanted to read. I just felt that we really had to find a way of getting this message out to people. I was told by a guy at Sydney Boat Show, a customer that I'd explained all these things to. I was told by him he'd just come off of the stand of a very common, very well-known production boat company in France. And he said to me, "Well, you've got to guess what I've just been told." And the long and the short of it, not to go around beat around the bush too much, was the guy who asked the salesman how this boat was going to fare in heavy weather. And the answer he got back is, "You'll never find out, sir, because this boat so fast she'll outrun the weather." And at that point, I really did think, oh my God, surely people are not believing this. But then you look at the evidence of the kind of boats that people unfortunately do try and head off across the oceans in. And actually, and then you think about, well, where do they get their information from? And you can easily see there's this big hole, there's this big gap that's there. Where do they get that from?
Which you're hoping Ocean Sailor magazine is filling.
And
yeah, so it's core issues then, Ocean Sailor's core issues. We know about Kraken. I think you're going now beyond Kraken. You're talking about what the leitmotif of ocean sailing is, not just Krakens, but it's got to be an integral keel. It's got to be a protected rudder. It's got to be thick layup. It's got to be a certain rig. It's got to be. There are loads of other things.
It's not really a certain rig, Dick. It's a strength of rig.
Okay.
You can keep a mast up using 3mm wire. You need 15, 16 mil wire to hold that same mast up in the middle of a big Atlantic blow or a storm. And so it's really, everybody's got their different ideas about what type of rigs are best. I've got a clear idea about that now, but it's really the integrity of, and returning to this whole message, it's got to be bomb-proof. And it doesn't matter to me whether somebody says, okay, well, of course, I'll be delighted they buy a Kraken yacht because it's got all of these features. But actually, if you push the boat a little bit further out, pardon the pun, actually, there's a lot of boats out there that do fit the bill. Unfortunately, most of them, if not all of them, were built more than 20 years ago. That's when it all changed. The production boat market kind of destroyed the industry that and the names that we knew, like Nicholson and Bowman and Contessa and Van der Stat. There was, when I was looking for the right boat to go off and build back in 1978, 1980, there were dozens of boats you could choose, and they all had those features. But then all of a sudden, really, in my view, two things happened. First, what happened is that, as I've already said, the production boats company started, and they found cheaper methods of building the same size boat. Principally, that's it. They used a nice uniform-shaped hull, bolted a keel on it, hung a rudder out the back. There's your boat, off you go.
And it's obvious, I suppose, but that is cheaper then, is it, than having a keel
cheaper.
Moulded into the...
Yeah, it's massively cheaper to do it that way, which is why it was started to do that way.
Your boats, they still come in. I shouldn't really be blowing your trumpet for you, but then only the Queen has somebody to blow a trumpet for, or we have to blow our own, or you have to blow your own. But I'll blow your one for you this time. And that is, the thing is that the Kraken is still a very competitively priced boat, is it not?
Yeah, it is. It's
if you're in that market.
To be honest, Dick, it's a bit of an illusion. We know we need to get boats out there around the world.
Right.
So to do that, the boats are very, very competitively priced now. My longer term plan is they won't be.
They're going to go up.
Yeah. But no, coming back to Ocean Sailor, what we wanted to do is build a community, or we wanted to give the community that exists of existing blue water cruisers and sailors information that they wanted. But also, we wanted to try and encourage people to poke their nose a bit further outside the port, and don't be so scared of going out and across an ocean. You know, we're going to cover in a podcast soon the mindset that's needed for going and crossing an ocean, or the skipper's mindset. But principally, there's really no difference from sailing for 3 days with a day in the middle, or 10 days in the middle, or 20 days in the middle. There's no real difference to it. And we want to try and explain to people how they can do it and feel 100% safe while they're doing it. And the answer is, as I say, compromise the size, compromise the equipment, don't compromise the core qualities that are necessary.
Fair enough. So Ocean Sailor magazine then, which I believe, I believe I know, it is published on the first day of each month, is it not?
Yeah, it comes out on it's a free magazine. As you know, you being the editor, but it's a free magazine. We don't carry any advertising from any outside source. It is sponsored by Kraken, so we do carry the Kraken story. It isn't. It's not aimed at selling Kraken yachts. It's aimed at providing people with the information they need to go off and sail around the world. So we cover dozens of different subjects that are not about weather, about wave patterns, about currents, about ocean planning.
I mean, in this latest issue, which comes out on the 1st of February, I mean, you turned to me and said, look, remember there was the big container ship, One Apus, in November last year, that lost about 1,800 containers in the Pacific.
Yeah.
And they are a worry for yachtsmen. They float
Well, they
around.
are, and I'm not so sure that people really understand the threat that there really is. And actually, I ask you to do that because of finding out about the Vendée Globe accidents. 3 lost their rudders and had to retire because they hit stuff. And my experience, not just in White Dragon, but also in Moonshadow, my previous boat, the Tayana 58 I mentioned, and before then as well in Corsa, my first boat, my experience is there is an awful lot of stuff floating around, flotsam and jetsam, that's floating around our oceans, and you can't start expecting to go and cross an ocean hoping and praying you won't hit something. In the Philippines, they've got something called FADs, fish aggregation devices, and they are laid by fishermen. They are a 12-foot by 8-foot steel buoy that's anchored in up to 2,000 metres of water as a fishing station. You can't see them on the radar. If you hit one and you're in a 5-6 mil thick laid up boat, you're going to sink, you're going to be in a life raft. And so what we wanted to do is tell people, look guys, this is how you do it. Whatever boat you buy, just make sure you got these features. And then obviously we wanted to try and explain to people, a fair bit more about the nuances and the things they needed to learn and understand.
Well, certainly the industry have told Ocean Sailor in the February issue that about 1,300 containers go missing every year. A lot of people think it's a lot more than that. I mean, they say the industry would say that, wouldn't they? And the industry do concede to some extent that it can be higher.
Did you say 1,300?
Yes.
Can be 1,800 were on this one ship.
Exactly right.
Wow, yeah.
Exactly right. But they, when I put that to them, they do concede that actually it can be as high as 10,000 a year. A lot of other people think it might even be higher than that. So we're doing our best. But anyway, that's how many the industry are admitting to going over there. They admit it can be up to 10,000 a year. It's quite a lot. A lot of them sink, of course, but the reefers, the refrigerated ones with buoyancy in them, don't. And there's a guy...
Yeah, well, that's it. And so, I ask you to investigate that as part of the Ocean Sailor information so that people can start to form the right view. We can all go now with not really a great deal of cost and have a satellite phone and link up to find out the weather. But actually, is that sufficient? Do you not need to really be and live in your environment? So last month we did all about the cloud formations that prelude bad weather coming. So you can live it, you can feel it, and it becomes. And I do greatly believe it. This whole thing, you can't cross an ocean without feeling some kind of symbiosis with the elements and the yacht and the crew. It all becomes one entity.
And for those who are interested in that weather piece, of course, they can go on to www.oceansailormagazine.com and get the back numbers, can't they?
Yeah, they can. They've only got to land on the website. You can pick up any of the information that's there.
Okay.
And backlog, and of course, what we want people to do, and the purpose of this podcast is to get to a wider audience of people that are interested and people that not necessarily are going to go tomorrow or next month or next year and sail around the world, but also to the people that, hey, could I do this? I think there's a lot of people stuck indoors over this last pandemic thinking, right, okay, after this, I'm not going to put off the things that I've thought about doing. I'm going to go and do them. So that's what's led to this. It's a motivation. It's, come on, guys, you could do it, and we can help you with that information.
So it's a case of swapping the armchair for the armature.
Oh dear. Your pardon, Steve.
Sorry about that. You're listening to Ocean Sailor Podcast with me, Dick Durham, and with him, Dick Beaumont. Please find us, if you would, on Twitter at Ocean Sailor Podcast, or even better, be part of the conversation by using hashtag Ocean Sailor Podcast. On the first day of every month, don't forget, head over to www.oceansailormagazine.com and have a good old read. Dick, so the podcast, is this a natural baby that's born out of Ocean Sailor, or?
Yeah, it all really comes about, again, more to try and get the message out and in a way that people can easily listen to and will assimilate with. And to build, again, all part of trying to build the community. But also, of course, we got a bit of time because we're all confined to barracks, or as it were, at the moment.
The only waves that are available to us are the airwaves. I'm sorry, I've done it again.
You're back in with the puns, brilliant. Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, what we're looking to do, we're going to publish a podcast every month. We're going to do a podcast every month. We'll talk about the subjects and the issues that revolve around ocean sailing and world cruising.
And subjects in the magazine. What's coming up, what we're going to discuss. We want to invite people to contribute to that, to the listeners of the podcast to contribute to that. Tell us what you'd like to hear us talking about and discussing, and give us any viewpoints that you think are different to those that we're putting forward. And we're also going to try and bring in each month a guest to give us a different viewpoint, maybe, or different set of experiences. Not necessarily somebody that sits there and agrees with everything we're saying. Hopefully we'll find a few people that, have got vehement reasons why they think, what you and I believe are not actually cast in stone. Well, it can always be edited.
But I'm certain we'll cut one up on the cutting room floor. But no, seriously, it is good. It's if the subject's just out there and it's being talked about, then I think we've achieved what we're trying to do and get the subject out and help people feel empowered to go and sail across an ocean, it's not such a big deal, I don't think. Well, we must be getting near to the end of our watch now, Dick, eh?
Well, that sounded like a whistle that needs wetting.
Yeah, I'll drink to that. Thanks, everybody, for listening in, and hope you've enjoyed our first attempt at a podcast. And please do listen in to
Ocean Sailor Podcast. And please find us on Twitter at Ocean Sailor Podcast, or be part of the conversation by using hashtag Ocean Sailor Podcast. Thank you so much, and goodbye.